Welcome to Grandma Magic, a podcast from the Grandmother Collective. We are a nonprofit organization that supports and advocates for a world where a grandmother's power is seen, cultivated, and activated for positive change. The Grandma Magic podcast is an opportunity to learn about the unique positions that grandmothers, aunties, and other older women around the world can play in advancing positive social development by talking to and learning from grandmother changemakers. We hope this series inspires you, brings you joy, and helps you recognize the enduring magic and wisdom that comes from grandmothers everywhere. I'm Lindsay Farrell, and I'm your host. Today we have the pleasure of speaking with Mary Balikungeri, the director and founder of Rwanda Women's Network. Born in Rwanda, Mary was only 6 when the war against the Tutsi began, forcing her family to immigrate to Uganda. Growing up as a refugee, she experienced injustice, but also had opportunities that others didn't, such as getting an education. Hearing the stories of unspeakable violence towards women during the genocide against the Tutsi, Mary felt compelled to act and offer women opportunities like she had. In 1995, she returned to Rwanda and founded Rwanda Women's Network, creating safe spaces for women who had nowhere else to go. From day one, she ensured these safe spaces were also places where women could come together to create a new future for themselves, offering financial education and leadership skill development in all the programs run by Rwanda Women's Network. Through her leadership, the organization strengthens collaboration between local authorities and community facilitators, ensuring long-term sustainability and ownership of the actions towards eradicating gender-based violence in local communities. Her work has widely informed the gender equality and women's human rights agenda at national, regional, and international platforms. And in 2018, she was honored by Queen Elizabeth with the Point of Light Award for her inspirational, exceptional acts in supporting thousands of victims of gender-based violence. I'm excited today to explore Mary's journey and how her experiences have shaped her commitment to making a difference. Hi, Mary.
Wow. Hi, Lindsay. How are you?
I'm good. I often
That
have
is,
the women I'm interviewing go, "Oh my gosh, it's so interesting to have my story read back to me."
that, that introduction is amazing. Where did you find it?
I pulled it together. I pieced it together.
Oh,
But I
wow.
really am. I'm so delighted that we have a chance to chat with you today about the work that you've been doing.
Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so what I've
Yeah.
been asking everyone on this podcast is to really share, because we really believe older women and grandmothers in our communities hold culture and ensure that there's some sort of cultural continuity while they also make change. So, what is a tradition that you are making sure that you're passing down to the generations after you, and why?
What I'm really thinking, I'm trying to pass on to the generation to come. It's for them to know that our generation way of thinking, of doing, might not be the same as the generation they're in, because contexts have changed. But what I strongly insist on, even a new generation to know, is that you have to first and foremost know who you are, where you've come from, and where you want to go. And I insist so much, even on my own children, to say that feel confident of who you are. Make sure you understand the context you are in. Our generation, we were very good at aligning ourselves and forgetting our rights. But I insist that remember you also have the rights to be who you want to be. But in that, be mindful also about yourself, about keeping up with yourself, not getting lost in the world because the world has decided it wants to go the way it wants to go, but know what you want and know how to go for it and have a good life. For me, that's what I keep insisting. Of course, at times there is a lot of distraction where we are reminded that we are old school. But we say we are old school, but we've made it because we've brought you where you are. So let you also be driven by a success story of bringing your other generation to a better life, to becoming productive human beings,
Mhm.
and at the same time giving yourself to others.
Yeah.
So really, for me, that's what I would want to pass down, because love and care and patience is very key in everyone's life. So
I,
I don't know if that makes sense to you,
it
Elise.
does. Yeah, it
Mhm.
does. You're trying to pass down a sense of autonomy and independence, but also a recognition of their responsibility to their communities.
Absolutely. And to be responsible citizens,
Yeah.
no matter where you are.
I would really love to understand what was for you the story of your why. Why did you come to decide for yourself that you were a leader and that you needed to create Rwanda Women's Network and go after what seems like a really intractable and complicated problem of gender equity and gender based violence in your country?
In everyone's journey, people's journeys shape who we eventually become in life. I believe having grown up in a Christian family, my father was an Anglican bishop, and the life we grew up in was a life of being with others, being with people, giving life to the needy, the most needy, praying for others. And so for me, that kind of life shaped me to
Yeah.
be who I am today, and especially to love and care and give myself to others. And I find a lot of joy and value in doing that. So the context we live in is always important. And
Mhm.
then, having lived in that kind of family, time came where my parents became such a responsible when there was a turmoil in our country, the first of its kind in 1959,
Oh,
where so many refugees came to our church. So we found ourselves as a family hosting entire communities from the neighborhoods. And fortunately, since my father was a bishop, other Anglican churches of the world came to support. And we grew up doing that. We grew up mobilizing. We grew up talking to community people, even at a very early age, going to school. You felt that in school you had to do community work. And that became part of our social life until a time came when we also had to go away as refugees after such a situation where now everybody had to leave the country to go to different neighboring countries. And we went and started afresh the same kind of life, settling refugees in a new foreign country, in new communities, because of that church connectedness,
mhm.
where we moved to the same Anglican church adopted us. And in adopting us, we also became adopted in the communities, and life went on. So you can imagine living a life, seeing yourself in that kind of environment, it really shapes you to make you who you are. So for me, I insist that in life you have to belong to some community. You have to feel that you are useful to others, no matter what you have. It's the gesture, it's the love, it's your presence that matter in everyone, in other people's lives. So for me, I think that's how it came about. And I got a lot of opportunities out of that. Went to school, managed to finish, and started doing other jobs. And in all that, it followed me all the way where I was, to the extent that even where I went as a refugee from Uganda to Kenya, it was also always community life, organizing, mobilizing,
Mm.
to want to be with others. Came to study in France, it was the same story, where I was very active in the diaspora of that time. Then I moved to Switzerland. Then I was fortunate I got a job to work with the World Council of Churches, of which philosophy was really my parents' philosophy, where the world churches are giving life to immigrants, are settling in immigrants in Switzerland, and at the same time are also working with different countries to look into how to settle refugees, how to think long-term settlement, all these kind of things. So all my life it has been that. So when I was there in my comfort zone and I saw what happened to my country, I said, I can't continue to do this and I don't go back. So there was a calling for me to go back and left Switzerland. I was just with, I had only two young daughters. I had just lost my husband. But that strong calling of wanting to see change, of a feeling of never again, just made me leave the country where I was, Switzerland, and went back to Rwanda and started all over again. And that is another journey I could talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting if people know the history of Rwanda that 1995 would have been a time to focus
Mhm.
on women, specifically because they had become the majority in the country. So, what was that?
Yes,
Mhm.
yes. My whole drive to go back to Rwanda and the focus of women, it's because I had followed closely on the horrifying situation the women of Rwanda went through. It was terrible to imagine that a one-time man you loved, whom you gave children, just woke up and decided to do away your life. You realize you come from an ethnic background which is not his.
Yeah.
Terrible. And seeing that and asking yourself, can human beings do that? And always questioning and challenging yourself to say, is this possible? But we saw it. Yes, it happened. But
Yeah.
the question is, how do we reverse this? And that's the struggle of the Rwanda of today, to say to ourselves, what happened should never, never again. And that drive is very much there, is so much felt with the new generation. It is our everyday conversation. It's our everyday searching for solution. So for us, life is all about that. But at the same time, we are saying we need to be sitting back and care also for ourselves. And I think that's why I connected with the Stephen Lewis Foundation. When he first came to Rwanda as a special envoy for the UN, he came and his delegation to visit our polyclinic of hope, which we had created a holistic intervention venue to give women opportunities who had gone through gang rapes to know that there can be another life,
Wow.
to make them speak out, feel that they are loved, and out of that, feel that there can be another life, learn to plan together as women, at the same time, connect, be in solidarity with each other while they are going through their process of healing, but at the same time, committing and determined to take lessons learned from the space to their own families and to their own communities. So we came to realize that we're in a journey of reconciliation without actually uttering the word reconciliation, but
Yeah.
rather looking for self-healing, self-empowerment, and working towards social transformation. So that for us was the really key drive. And so gradually we continue upgrading what we are doing up to this time. So we have expanded and we are receiving other countries that are going through conflict situations to come and learn from the context. But at the same time, we sit down with them to understand their context so that people can begin to learn to replicate on what they are learning from Rwanda, but based on their own context.
So, what are some of the core interventions that Rwanda Women's Network have in order
So,
to support women?
so when we started, the core of what was first of all and foremost for women to come together and go through soul searching. And in their soul searching, we knew whatever would come out would be their sustainability journey, their sustainability planning, because they have determined themselves what their priorities are. And it was so amazing to see that most women who came to that venue of social gathering, majority of them had come because they were living with situations which they never knew they could ever bring it out to any other person. But it was all about gender-based violence. It was all about gang rape during genocide. And even after genocide, as women went through these struggles of healing and wanting to connect with each other and building their lives, it really became a place for healing, a place for economic empowerment, a place for solidarity building, a place for learning the laws that should protect them, a place to know that if I want to advocate for whatever issue that is required in my community, I know where to go because I have learned it from that space. So it became a mini learning school, and it has evolved to be a women-centered empowerment venue, which has now eventually integrated the men. Lindsay, today we are saying we will never, never achieve gender equality unless it is driven through women empowerment. And we can attest to that because we're seeing it working, where men came to realize the importance of gender we are talking about, the influence of the cultural norms, the patriarchy life we live in. If people never understand it, they can never talk about, you can't talk about gender. You have to go deep down to understand these social norms, what they mean, the cultural challenges we live with. What are the good ones do we want to keep? And what are the bad ones that are really suppressing families? And gradually, men are starting to realize, you know what? In fact, it's about families, it's about society, it's about our country. And that's how women are now driving change in their own communities. They have to understand that niche of why are we never able to complement each other in a way. It's because of where we socialize, and we socialize that way because of our cultural way of life. And so we have to go deep down to understand this cultural way of life in the context of where we are today. Where is it? Where is the gap? What is it that we want to keep of yesterday? And what are we keeping of today? And what are we seeing of today that is funny? And why are you calling it funny? And remember, the person who is being brought in this context does not see it funny as you are. So how do we balance in order to respect each other's ways of life? That's the underlying when we are talking about creating safe spaces for women, for families, and eventually for communities.
Yeah, I have so many questions that I want to ask you. There's two that come to mind, and maybe you'll answer them separately or together. I know, and maybe some people who are listening know this as well, that Rwanda has really been, in terms of gender equity in government and in the legislature, kind of a leading force. We know that. And maybe this is still the case that you have a requirement that a certain amount of people in the legislature and your government are women. Right. That's been the case since the current government came into place. But at the same time, I think what I'm hearing from you is that there is still a resistance, despite women of your generation coming back or taking up leadership after the genocide and showing the way in which women can lead, that there still seems to be a resistance, maybe at the grassroots level. And then my second question that keeps coming up as you are talking about what's good to keep and what's good to leave behind. I wonder if you can give more specific examples of what that looks like in Rwanda. I think people who understand more of an African type culture may understand patriarchy and things like that, but I think it's specific in Rwanda. There's specific ways in which women have been maybe unequal in the past.
We have come to realize that all these happenings going on, not only in my country, Rwanda, but everywhere in the world, it all zeroes on governance. How are we governing ourselves? And how are we prioritizing? And how are we involving everyone in the game? I think that's what Rwanda plays a big role and a great win, because participation is real. That's why in the kind of work I do, I'm able to create safe spaces for women. And for me, when you talk about democracy, for me, it begins there. Because in our creation of spaces, to go deep down, to interrogate our souls, beyond our souls, interrogate our communities, interrogate our government, interrogate where we've come from and where we want to go. And how are we going to influence this? And how do we strategize to make sure that we are also in that decision-making level? But in doing all of this, the most important learning women, even families, even men must know is that most women have not understood the kind of power they hold in themselves.
Yes.
And that becomes very painful. You can only give them that opportunity to understand when we talk about power. Because after all, gender, all these things, governance, development, it's all about power. So as women sit back, we have a program we call Gender 24 Hours. And just take that woman in the community and ask her, as soon as you get out of your bed in the morning, tell us what you do. From that moment you get out of your bed. And when she's there with her husband, you ask your husband, what do you do? And they tell you that program has made men realize that, you know what? Finally, they came to realize that no wonder most men, when they're unfortunate and lose their wives, they won't last long, but they will go look for wives immediately. And the woman who is widowed won't even care less, won't even have that time. What is at heart is her children. And you take them into analysis of that in itself. That triggers a conversation that helps them to see how powerful they are. But the question is now, have you come to realize how powerful you are? So how do you want now to share your power? How do you bring the ego of that man because of the way we are socialized? It becomes such an interesting conversation. And to be able to do that, you must be in a very conducive environment that allows you to really stage such a kind of conversation because you're transforming people's lives right from the household level to community, and then you get to the decision making, where that person who has learned that way of looking at her own self and now is going to be making laws that are protecting now the entire circle. Then the question becomes, how do we continue to make linkages, both at the grassroots level where we are talking this entirely with our souls, with our excitement, with our freedom, to the people who have gone to the political arena? What are your issues there? How do you continue to liaise with us? These are the conversation of women of Rwanda. And I tell you, we are so, so excited about the current governance. And we are saying it's either now or never. And we need to make sure that we continue to remain connected. But the biggest thing we have to deal with is for us to know that there has been a change. The change is there. It's how we, as women, we embrace it while we bring these men on board.
Because there's still resistance there, right? That's
Of,
still
of course,
that's still a hurdle to
patriarchy.
overcome.
You live in a patriarchy society. There is still resistance. Remember resistance because you don't want to lose your power in your own home. But now that laws have changed, you can no longer own that piece of land on your own. It is owned by all of you. The question for us is to make sure that it is operational. And that's what you are working with.
So, Mary, one of the questions I ask a lot, especially of older women, mature women, experienced women, the thing that we think is even more unique of not just having women leaders, but having older women leaders who are coming with a wisdom and an experience. Do you have any sense of what the uniqueness of leading while aging or leading as an older woman has meant to you?
I always like to go back to my story with the Stephen Lewis Foundation. When he came with a delegation from the UN and he visited Polyclinic of Hope, he listened to the stories of these women. The entire delegation, they were in tears. And he listened on how we are doing, working in those spaces to transform these women coming from the painful situation to a much more giving back situation, the journey we had to undertake. He kept on asking me, you do all this, but how do you care for yourself? I remember that time I started laughing because he was with Ellen Johnson, the former
Yes,
president.
from Liberia.
Yes, yes. And the Olaf Palmer's widow. Those are the people delegation that came to Rwanda in 1995. And then they asked me and my field workers, we say to them that we just find joy in what we are doing. And this keeps us, and for us, that's our health. They were not convinced still, but we were doing it endlessly. We had no office hours. We could leave 8, 9. We sit and eat our dinner in the space. We go back home late and we're happy. We are not,
Yeah.
until we came to realize that, we are burning out. Stephen Lewis took an initiative. I will never forget this. And I like talking about it. He went back to Canada. He started talking about the genocide reconstruction we were going through at that time. And the Daily Mail, some newspaper, wrote about the story of Polyclinic of Hope, and he put my email. I don't know how many emails and how many checks I received in Rwanda that time, until I had to write to them and say, you know what? We are getting overwhelming responses because of this article that Stephen put in the Daily Mail. But we can't receive these checks. We cannot cash them here. That time, in fact, check banks were even not operating well. So
Oh
I
my
had to put
goodness.
everything back in the envelope, send back to Stephen Lewis, and that's how they started, in fact, supporting us. They have been supporting my organization, I don't know for how many years now, too many
Yeah.
years. So all the fees for the children of the survivors, of those women whose husbands were in jail, their children, and these are now the ones leading the spaces. They are the ones who are in the communities driving change. So one time we get a message from Stephen West Foundation, invited women where they had visited, invited me from Rwanda, invited another woman from Zimbabwe, another woman from Kenya, I think another woman from, I don't know whether from Uganda. He said, we want you to have a conversation here and we want you to meet psychologists, Canadian psychologists. Lindsay, we came and spent time in Toronto. And for them, they needed to feel that we want you to feel cared for. We want you to relax. Really, it was a moment to begin to say to ourselves, you know what, you also have a life. But we had it difficult to understand that philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
We had difficulties to understand it. But we were happy to be in a hotel, to be cared for, to meet the psychologists, to talk to us. But our exchange, when we were talking with them, we felt good. We are feeling good about it. But then what? Our minds are in our offices in Kigali, others in Zimbabwe, but our offices are, our minds are still back there. So we started now taking seriously programs of wellness. And when I talk to women like you and others, when you live in a context like ours, which is still struggling to become a better context, struggling with issues of poverty, health issues. So I keep saying that we need to work with you on redesigning a wellness-centered program for women.
I'll tell you,
Yes.
Mary, the grandmothers in my collective, it doesn't matter where they are in the world. They could have everything that they need materially, but driving change in the world, working to make it better, trying to solve systems and fight inequality and fight injustice takes a toll on everyone.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is a conversation we have in our group of women often.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
So out of this global networking and doing this, I landed myself in Edmonton, where women of the world met in a network we are calling a global network of women shelters.
Wow.
I was invited to this global network of women shelters because they had heard again the story of Polyclinic of Hope. So I came to present in Edmonton that model. And we were also hearing the women of Canada, of United States, other women from Africa, other women from Latin America, from Asia. It was fantastic about how women are supporting women survivors in different ways. This network is still there. Next year, we are meeting in Australia. And this was born in Edmonton with the shelters of Canada. So we are saying, how do we do shelter to shelter? How do we support women survivors emotionally, especially when they come to such a space? We need to begin to do things beyond the donor world way of doing things. I want to speak about this somewhere in Denmark. And I went in a small commune. They call them communes in Europe. And I was staying in a shelter where women who were seeking for refuge were staying. And I said to these women, you know what, I will come and stay there because I want to see how your programs run. Of course, privileged countries, like even when I visit shelters here in Switzerland, it's different from ours. And I said to them, I need to show you how we beat you in what we do. Because in ours, they are not shelters like you call them ours as spaces, but they are spaces for empowerment. They are spaces for transformation. But your shelter spaces are for service delivery, which is good. But how can you interject the whole empowerment that you are trying to bring about women changing the world? We need to say we take advantage of the entire empowerment program for when these women come to such a spaces, are able even to understand how come you're even here? What brings you here? And go deep down to discuss with them what brings them. And for me, that conversation is the beginning of women shifting away from being battered to being women change makers. So my battle in this shelter movement, I'm saying we have to be thinking politically, not always social nurturing. And we have to use social nurturing to transform and to see things differently because this world is driven by politics. And it becomes such an interesting way of looking at things, but we are not yet there. We are still struggling. At least most African women have understood that because we are at a different level. African governments cannot support shelters because they will always say that this is not cultural friendly.
Yeah, it's a family matter. It's a matter for
Yeah,
the church. It's
it's
a
a
matter
family
for,
matter, but at the same
yeah.
time, we are saying, okay, it's not cultural friendly, but we are here to promote reconciliation. And if we are promoting reconciliation, we must be talking about it from somewhere. And that's how Rwanda came to understand the importance of women's safe spaces. But we are now struggling with issues of sustainability. If I don't have Canadian government supporting me or women shelters like you supporting me, they will collapse. And where is my sustainability? So we with the women now with the meager sources we have from our own fields, we are saying, hey, guys, let's start thinking on how to sustain our venues, which are democratic venues, which are venues of power, which are venues of changing our lives.
Which are venues that ideally align with a lot of the goals of what have been values
Absolutely.
that the government in Rwanda has espoused since the
Absolutely, absolutely.
gender
And then
equity,
we come to
equality.
realize that as grandmothers or grassroots women, we need to remain relevant and connected to the national level, whereby we have created, my organization has created SDG 5 Forum, which invites all other like-minded women's rights organizations, other organizations that are interested in cross-cutting gender issues and different goals to come and listen to the women from grassroots voices.
SDG 5 is the gender equality.
Yes, SDG 5 Forum, yes, is the Gender Equality Forum. And then we use that forum to amplify women, grassroots women's voices, but at the same time invite the policymakers in that space where women bring collective issues and come and table them while they're having the policymakers into discussion. Without a well-governed country, you can't do that. So we challenge them, like post-COVID, we say to the government, do you know what these women were going through? They would never have understood until they listened to a woman that comes from that lower level. And we started even challenging the women of the middle class, those entrepreneurs, who are still, by the way, not as open as those women who have got spaces and who have seen spaces at their classroom. It has become a classroom. It has become a place where you go when you want to cry on the shoulder of somebody. It is a classroom where you say, should anything happen, I even have a bed somewhere. So it's very important in people's life to know that there is an alternative when things go haywire.
So now you're at this point in your career where your focus is more global, more international, more sharing of your model in order to spread. Yeah.
And my struggle now is to make sure that what we've done for the last 30 years does not collapse. And listen, that's the hardest part. And my country is reminding all of us that we need to bring new leadership on board. And that's what we are doing. And I've been working on this. And this succession plan, that's what I've been saying to some of our donors. I said, you people are not even asking us about the succession plan. Be in succession plan with us. The entire world is talking about localization. What localization are you saying if you are not looking, listening to the challenges of succession plan? They must build in this. So I keep saying to the women, it's very, very important that the succession plan takes place, be it at our organization level, even at our household levels, because time will come when we can't do what we are doing. And yet we want to continue to remain relevant. So in our relevance is to have a team that still values your voice, a team that values the institution, not a team that's thinking of surviving because of being in that institution, but rather wants to see the institution survive. And that is a concept that does not come easy.
I can imagine the
Yes,
thought of Mary not being at the helm is
yes,
something people don't want to think about. But I'm sure that you will sort it and find the path as you have for the last.
yes. No, I think there is, because if I can afford to come here and be babysitting my grandchildren, I'm here because my daughter has given birth.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes, yes, I'm now a grandma for the second time.
Wonderful. And you're
Yeah,
able to prioritize grandmother.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I try to. And there are times when I say to my daughter, I'm here, I'm here. But because they have been nurtured in a way that they want to be independent,
Yeah.
but at least feel good that I can call mom. Oh, mom, today I'm going to pediatric. Can you drive by and we go together? Can I come and can I do this? Can we do this? So
Yeah.
they feel very happy when they see me around. Though I'm trying to work from a distance, it also gives me joy to have a change.
Well, that's what
Yeah,
everybody tells me. The grandmothering stage. It's a very different mindset. Like it is like
absolutely.
kind of wanting to let go of what you've
I,
done and think
I'm
about
so
a new pathway. Yeah.
I'm sorry, but with these new generations are busy regulating us. We need to sit down as grandmothers and also share the experiences of the generational gap that is
Yes.
there. The
Yes.
thinking and our thinking and their thinking. And then how do we balance to make sure that we remain relevant and we remain loved? Because when you hear so many stories of different grandmothers, whew, at times they can make you cry.
Oh, definitely. There's
Oh
definitely
yeah,
a
oh
challenge
yeah.
of.
And those are things we need to be able to find the solace through, also as we nurture ourselves.
Well,
Yeah,
Mary, it has
yeah.
been so lovely to hear about
I
your
think
journey.
I've enjoyed talking to you, Lindsay. Let's keep connecting.